and it's about 6:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us for our 2020 Rare Bird Recap webinar. If this is your first time joining us for this annual event, welcome. We usually hold this event in a community space. Last year we presented at Lead Dog Brewing here in Sparks, but given the circumstances, we are ramping up our webinar events, and on the plus side, this also gives us the opportunity to expand our audience. So before we get started, just a few logistics to go over. First of all, you are all muted and I can't see you or hear you. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature located at the bottom of your screen. I will direct all questions to Ned. We will hold all questions until the end of the review list presentation. We request that you please keep your comments and questions appropriate and on topic. My name is Kayla Henry. I am an outreach coordinator here with Great Basin Bird Observatory. For those of you not familiar with us, we are a nonprofit based here in Reno, Nevada. We are dedicated to the conservation of birds through research, partnerships, and education, and through outreach events like this. Tonight, we'll hear from our project biologist and fellow outreach coordinator, Ned Bohman, for the rare birds documented in Nevada in 2020. These reports and lists are curated by the Nevada Birds Record Committee. They're a dedicated group of volunteers with the specific purpose of verifying rare bird sightings. We will also have a fun quiz at the end to test your ID skills. And with that, I'll hand controls over to Ned so we can talk about some rare birds.
Awesome, thanks Kayla. Let me just get my screen share going here. All right, so thanks for the intro, Kayla, and thanks for joining us, everyone. As Kayla said, we're going to be going over the rare birds that were seen in the state in 2020. And as I'll go over in a minute, the distinction between rare birds and review species. So yeah, let's get going. Before we get into the birds, I just want to give a quick GBBO update here and let you know about some upcoming events as we continue to brainstorm creative solutions for our outreach program during this pandemic. Very disappointed to have to suspend trips since last year, but are looking forward to spring trips. We are keeping an eye on conditions and looking out for everyone's safety, but are optimistic that by April we can do some field trips here, but I guess we'll see. We've also got the 2021 Birdathon coming up, just like we did last year with the backyard birding category, as well as the proper big day category. And of course, as I mentioned before with the pandemic, we've got some more Zoom webinars coming up as well. Next field season, we're gearing up for a productive start, a couple new projects, continuing a couple old projects. You can find info about our projects on our YouTube channel. Actually, we did a presentation a few months back going over a lot of our work in much more detail. So check that out. So this year, this is the list of review species that showed up in our state. And so the distinction here is that review species, it sort of filters out the quote unquote less rare rarities. So to be in the review list, there must be less than 5 sightings of that species within the past 10 years. So that filters out some of the stuff that we see every year, but isn't really an everyday bird, like northern shrike, northern parula, American redstart, things like that, that are rare for sure, but are not review species. And there were a few species that gained enough endorsed records this year to be removed from the review list as well. So, Mexican duck was split from mallard this year in June. Just before that, the committee began reviewing records of what were then the Mexican subspecies of mallard. But once it was obvious the split was coming is why they began reviewing them. So this bird pictured is a male, looks a lot like a female mallard, but you can see it's got that bright yellow bill, which is not shown on a mallard. And obviously a male mallard has the bright green head. But the females can be a little trickier. The Mexican duck females are a bit darker overall in coloring. But what really does it is if they cooperate for an ideal view and show you their speculum with the narrow white borders as opposed to the broad white borders on a mallard. So I mentioned they were reviewing all of the submissions of the subspecies. There were 8 submitted, 6 were endorsed. So with that, it was added to the state checklist, but not the review list because there were plenty of records to not review it. So next up, we have a broad-billed hummingbird. This was found at Cactus Springs by Brandon Miller on April 27th. And Cactus Springs is located about an hour north of Las Vegas, right off Highway 95, and is a really great migrant trap and worth checking during migration for fun stuff to show up. But broad-billed hummingbird is a great find. Only the 9th endorsed record in the state and the 1st since 2017. So gorgeous bird, treat to see, especially hundreds of miles from their core range. Zona. Next up, we have kind of a tricky species. This is a glossy ibis. It was at the Clark County Wetlands Park on June 27th through 29th. Originally found by Ben Zyla and is the 5th endorsed record for the state. So they look incredibly similar to our common and expected white-faced ibis, and indeed can be indistinguishable at certain times of the year. However, in the spring, when last year's winter birds have finally developed their first adult molt, they can be told apart by subtle differences in the face pattern, which you may be able to see already, but there you can see the cool bluer tones on the face of the glossy compared to the whiter, warmer, almost pink-infused tones on the white face there. However, in winter, it's a little trickier. The non-breeding plumage of the adults is different in that the white face shows a red iris, and that of the glossy is dark. So if you see a bird with a red iris, you know you've got a white-faced adult non-breeding. But with a dark iris, you could be looking at a non-breeding glossy, a young white-faced. So they just look identical. So only in the spring can you be certain that you're looking at a bird that is not in its juvenile plumage and it's in its breeding plumage. And that's when you can tell them apart. Though maybe with the experienced eye, someone can tell the overall blue-green gloss of a glossy from the overall golden rosy gloss of the white-faced, but I certainly can't. Next up, we have a Mississippi kite. This bird was very cooperative. It showed up also at the Wetlands Park in Clark County on July 1st and remained almost at the exact same spot, often being seen in the exact same tree perch for nearly a month. Just over a month, until August 8th is when it was last seen. It was originally found by Corey Sanders and seen by many. We've got 12 endorsed records of these guys in the state, the most recent one being in 2015 at Corn Creek. Their core range extends as far east as Colorado and New Mexico, and they've got a little isolated pocket of breeding birds in central southern Arizona. But certainly not here. You can see they're pretty easy to identify. They're falcon size and shape, roughly. They've got that really dark gray plumage. And the dark patch around the eye is a useful field mark shown in all plumages of this bird. But the juveniles are brown and streaky below, and you can see this individual has some of that brown streaking, is not quite in its adult plumage there. Right, now a dusky-capped flycatcher was found in Big Smoky Valley on May 31st and seen again the following day. It was found by Adrian Hinkle, and it's only the 3rd endorsed record of this species in the state. Interestingly enough, one of the other records was found by GBBO surveyors at one of our long-term restoration monitoring sites, Warm Springs Natural Area. But it's interesting because this species is common not too far to the south in Arizona and shows up fairly regularly in the fall and winter on the California coast. But they just don't come this far east, I guess, or north. So they belong to excuse me, they belong to a genus of flycatcher called Myarchus. And you can see on the right, I've got a photo of an ash-throated flycatcher, and below that is a brown-crested flycatcher. And you can see how incredibly similar all three of these birds look. But if you look on the tail, you can see there's some rufous coloring in both of our expected species, the ash-throated and brown-crested. Whereas if you look on the dusky-capped, there's no rufous whatsoever in the tail. So that's actually a useful field mark if you can see that. However, oftentimes that's tough to see. And the best way to distinguish them can be vocalizations. And fortunately, the Myarchids are a pretty vocal bunch. And the dusky-capped has a call that is quite different than the others. And so I'm just going to play that for you quickly. Hopefully y'all can hear that. We were having some technical difficulties with sound in some of our practices. Wasn't sure how to bump up that volume, so hopefully you can hear that. Next up, we have a tropical kingbird. This has a very similar pattern actually to dusky-capped in that this is also the third endorsed record, and they regularly show up on the California coast and sometimes spend the winter even. But their breeding range is a bit further south. This particular bird was found and photographed on June 17th by Ben Zyla. Like I mentioned, it's only the third endorsed record for the state. And because it's so difficult to distinguish visually from Couch's kingbird, most of the submitted records of these guys have not been endorsed because there just wasn't sufficient documentation. But fortunately, Ben was able to get an audio recording of this bird, and that cinched the ID. So this recording that I'm about to play was not the actual recording Ben took. It was a little too quiet to use in here, but it was this call. So that sort of chirpy twittering there. And like I said, they look essentially identical to Couch's kingbird. So with the yellow coming up all the way to the throat there. But here's a Couch's kingbird for you. Quite different sound. So totally different vocalization, but an identical looking bird. And then I just have some photos on the bottom there of our, well, not that thick bill is expected, but that it's also a yellow-bellied kingbird. Western kingbird is by far the most common in the state, and you can see the yellow doesn't even come up all the way to the breast. It stays kind of low there. So if you see the yellow coming up high, then you know you've got something worth looking at. All right, wood thrush, always a delight to find, no matter where you are. This particular one found a cool 1,500 miles from its breeding range. These guys breed in the East Coast in the dense deciduous woods, certainly not in the desert. This was found at a house in Henderson on May 13th and stuck around long enough for Amanda Kernighan to get some nice photos. So this is the 8th endorsed record for the state. And you can see they're a pretty easily identifiable bird, distinct field marks. They can look similar to some other brown thrushes like hermit and Swainson's thrushes, but wood thrushes are larger, much more contrasty. That brown back is really a bright red rufous. Those chest spots are bold black on white. Just a very contrasty bird. And well, if you're lucky enough to hear them sing, they do have a wonderful song. And I'll just play that for fun here. Really is a wonderful sound. Okay, bronze cowbird. So these guys were removed from the list this year. This was the 7th endorsed record for the state. And based on the bylaws, this was the 5th within the past 10 years, so it was removed. But this was found and photographed at the Wetlands Park, again, by Daniel Mitev and Scott Page on July 3rd. So you can see they look similar to brown-headed cowbirds. So in that photo, you've got the male bronzed cowbird is on the left with the red eye, and those 3 other birds are female brown-headed cowbirds. which closely related, but you can see they're smaller, a little more slim. And a female bronzed would still show the the red eye and be that big chunky size like that. Rusty Blackbird, also removed from the review list this year. We had 2 endorsed records in 2020, one at the Upper Las Vegas Wash above the Wetlands Park, and one in Moapa Valley Corn Maze, both in January. They were both found and photographed by Justin Straight. And that guy gets around, man. I don't know if you've seen some of these photo credits, but he's got a lot of photos in here. There's now 13 endorsed records, and not to say everyone else doesn't. A lot of people have done a lot of good work contributing to these, not to single anyone out. There were 13 endorsed records for this species in the state. Some of those even with more than one bird present. We've got 5 endorsed records for birds found in the past 3 years. In addition to the 2 mentioned above, there's one found in Pahrump. Straight found 2 at the Clark County Wetlands Park from December of 2018 to January 2019. There was one at Hidden Valley in 2018. So you get the idea, they're becoming a bit more abundant. We're seeing a bit more of these guys. And just quickly, the ID, you could potentially confuse them with Brewer's blackbirds. Obviously, they're a blackbird, similar size and shape. Rusty blackbirds have a pale iris, both male and female, in all plumages, and non-breeding plumaged males have bright rufous edging on a lot of their feathers, as opposed to the male Brewers. You can see on the bottom right is just that solid black color. And female rusties are just bright rufous red with the pale iris. So they do look quite distinct. It can be confusing looking at blackbirds, but once you sort out the field marks, they do separate out quite nicely. So warblers. We've got surprisingly few remaining on the review list. Only 13 of the 49 recognized species in the US are left on the review list. Some of our more common wanderers are warblers like northern parula, redstart, American redstart, that is, and black and white warbler. Unfortunately for southern Nevada, they have a climate that really favors warblers, nice and warm. And indeed, most of our vagrant warblers tend to show up down there. So this year, worm-eating warbler was found in Red Rock Canyon Conservation Area by Daniel Mitev, another guy that gets around. And you can see that bird on the top left there with that very distinct stripy head pattern is pretty unique. It's the 14th endorsed record for the state and the 2nd at Red Rock Canyon. Some other locations it was found were Pahranagat, Corn Creek, Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve, Warm Springs. So a lot of these sort of migrant traps in the warm southern part of the state. And actually, one of the few highlights from northern Nevada, there on the top right, you see a blue-winged warbler found by Nick Rosen on May 28th at the Carson River Diversion Dam. We've got 6 endorsed records for the species in Nevada. 3 of the other ones are from Clark County, one from Lida, and then the other one actually from the McCarran Ranch, just east of Reno, and that one was in 2009. And the other warbler there in the bottom middle, a prairie warbler, found on June 18th by Andrew Lee at Corn Creek. We've got 9 endorsed records of prairie warbler in the state, and the most recent prior to this was 8 years ago at Bonham Ranch. So we don't see these guys too often. I don't need to get into the weeds of warbler identification here because that is a whole separate hour-long presentation. But quickly, a few things about these. I mentioned the head pattern on the worm-eating warbler, which is not a silver bullet per se, but there's not too many birds with that pattern like that. The blue-winged warbler with the bright yellow could suggest a yellow warbler. Once you see the wings, you know it's not that. It's got bright white undertail coverts. It's got bright white wing bars and dark lores, which put together are very useful field marks. Particularly those undertail coverts, because we all know how often you only see warblers from the underside. And then that prairie warbler on the bottom, you can even see that dark semicircle under the eye. They actually do show that in all plumages, so that face pattern on those guys is really distinct. That combined with sort of the yellow breast and the streaks on the flanks, unique pattern. Next warbler is a fun one. So a pine warbler was found and well documented at the Arroyo Grande Sports Complex in Las Vegas by Daniel Mitev. This was October 22nd, and it only stayed for one additional day. The two included photos are from Tim Almond, but this is the first endorsed record for the state, a species that a lot of folks here have been expecting and looking for. In fact, last year when I was putting together this same presentation and I polled the records committee on what they all thought the next addition to the state checklist would be, pine warbler was talked about and picked. So there you go. We've got a couple non-endorsed reports where there wasn't just not enough documentation, but here you go. Great, well documented, beautiful photos. And the only species officially added to the state checklist in 2020. It can be a tough ID depending on the bird. They can be pretty variably plumaged, anywhere from drab, almost gray with no yellow to bright yellow. But just behind and below the eye, that auricular patch there, that darker color, and the yellow supercilium, the eyebrow, that face pattern is really unique, and when that's present, that is a very useful cue to the ID. Otherwise, they're a little larger than most warblers, a little thicker build, but that face pattern, when it's present, is the best. So that goes through all of the review species that were seen this year and officially endorsed. We do have a few sightings that are they're still pending. They're not going to be reviewed until later this month or next month. But there's some interesting species, so we'll talk about them anyway, even though, I mean, that photo, I'm sure that's going to get endorsed. But so two reports of blue jays came in from northeastern Nevada. One from November 4th and involved a dead blue jay found in a yard. And it was buried, presumably out of respect for its beauty and rarity, naturally. But when the finder was contacted by the records committee looking for documentation, she obliged and she went out and dug it up and got some photos, not including those photos in tonight's show. The second blue jay is a live one in the picture there in Tuscarora, so just north of Elko, about an hour north of Elko. Was there for 5 days. November 11th was its first day seen. Previously, we've got 6 endorsed records in the state, 4 from Elko County, 1 from White Pine, and 1 from Churchill County in Fallon. And so I suspect that there's more blue jays wandering in northeastern Nevada than are actually documented, because you can see on the range map there, their non-breeding range, they wander to southern Idaho. And there's just such little birder coverage in the northeastern part of the state that you could easily see a wandering blue jay being messed up there. This one's fun, maybe even just for the photo alone, but well, it's naturally a very rare bird. Snow bunting found on November 5th by Greg and Pam Nelson near the Buffalo Hump Mine, which is in central Nevada in the Desitoya Mountains. Cool thing about this sighting, like I just said, that photo there, other than the fact that it's a really rare bird, that photo is Pam's photograph of the bird, which you can see shows Greg taking a picture of the bird. Photos of photographers. So next we've got a ruddy ground dove found by Tim Almond, where the Las Vegas Wash flows into Lake Mead. This was on November 13th. Unfortunately, the bird was about 100 yards away and a very tiny photo was submitted. I'm not sure if you guys can all see my clicker there, but there is actually a bird there. And Tim provided compelling evidence along with the photo, and it makes sense. They were being seen in considerable numbers in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas at the time, so it does make sense. We've got 8 endorsed records for this species, the most recent from 2017, and as you might imagine, they're all from southern Nevada. Okay, this bird, our last pending record, found by Ben Sonnenberg at Virginia Lakes Park in Reno. He found a Hutton's vireo while he was doing his Christmas bird count route. So if endorsed, it will be the first state record, be number 492 to the checklist, and is in fact another bird that was mentioned when polling the records committee what they thought their next addition to the checklist would be. But not last year, that was this year. Literally days after I polled the committee what they thought the next bird would be, Jean Tinsman emailed me back saying she was picking Hutton's vireo. And it was days later when Ben found this bird. So, I don't know, Jean, if she didn't live farther away, I might be more suspicious she paid someone to release this bird. No, not really. They come incredibly close to Nevada, and it's almost surprising that it's come till now to get the first record. If you look on eBird, there's some super close records in California, and it seemed pretty plausible that one might show up in the Tahoe Basin or the Carson Range in an oak stand somewhere, but all the way in Virginia Lake Park. So good job, Ben. Nice find. So that concludes all of the species that we're seeing this year. That link there is where you can submit records of your own finds if you do find review species. And as I just mentioned, I did poll the committee on what they thought was going to show up next, and these were some of the birds that came up. Great black-backed gull, tufted duck, black vulture. I defaulted Jean's pick back to that one because she was calling for black vulture last year, and she changed her mind this year. Eastern meadowlark was talked about, canyon towhee, cave swallow. They're all pretty plausible. So, with that, I suppose I better check if we have any questions here. So we'll go ahead and pause for a second.
I have not seen any questions come in yet.
All right. If no one has any questions,
Molly
then I guess
says thanks. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Molly. All right. Well, then we'll jump back in here and we'll get to the quiz.
Lauren Phillips says no questions, just very excited for the bird quiz. So let's do it.
All right, I'm getting there, Lauren. Okay, so you guys can type into the chat feature what you think these birds are, and I believe we have the chat set up so that it only comes to Kayla and I, so that you all won't be able to see what everyone else is guessing. And we'll give it a second for folks to guess, and then Kayla will let me know what people are thinking.
Yeah. Somebody says Western Kingbird. Cassin's Kingbird. Dusky-capped Flycatcher.
So I guess we'll just keep letting the guesses flow in. Maybe we ought to put an ultimatum on these, give people 10, 20 seconds to, what do you think?
We're good. I think we can call it now.
All right, so Kayla was announcing some of the calls that were coming in, and this is in fact a dusky-capped flycatcher. You could tell it's not a kingbird. I guess sort of the body structure, the tail length, body proportions. It's one of those things where now I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, why isn't it a kingbird? It's got a nice long tail. It's got no rufous in it like the other Maiarchids. Oops, sorry, I'm still on this one. But yes, that is a dusky-capped flycatcher, so good guess.
Yeah, it was Justin Street and Roseanne Howard both guessed Dusky-capped Flycatcher.
Nice. Nice work, guys. All right, next bird.
No guesses yet. We have eastern meadowlark from a couple people.
Any other guesses?
Nope, let's reveal.
Well, it is in fact an eastern meadowlark. Be curious to see what other folks cited for why they thought it was an eastern meadowlark. But that white mallard stripe there, which is right by the bill and the yellow throat, is mostly white on the eastern meadowlark, and you would see more yellow on a western. But this is a really tough ID to make visually, and in the field, you'd really be hoping your bird would vocalize, or for the visual, the tail feathers are a little more useful than the mallard pattern. But I just put that one in there for fun.
We had several guessed correctly.
Yeah, context.
Nothing yet.
I see some chats coming in.
Mm-hmm. We have Mexican duck, both Rose and Justin. Blue-winged teal is another guess. And Mexican duck, a lot of people guessing Mexican duck.
Well, a lot of people are correct. This is a pair of Mexican ducks. And like I was saying before, that is the male in the front with it looks like a female mallard with a yellow bill. And behind him is the female there. And you can see that the female Mexican duck has that same bill coloration as a female mallard. So, but the overall body plumage is a bit darker. And you can sort of see that white border to the blue speculum there on the male in the front. The female's hiding hers, but Mexican ducks have, again, a very narrow white stripe there next to the blue, compared to on a mallard, that white stripe will be a bit wider and distinct.
We have a comment that the bird in the back looks like a possible hybrid with white in the tail. Just something.
Yeah, could be. Like I said, with this, I'm not very well versed in this species complex. I'm not having a great view of that, but that is, they definitely would hybridize with mallards. That they're so closely related that wouldn't be very unusual at all. So a good comment.
I have a couple guesses coming in here. Purple finch seems to be the consensus.
All right, give people another minute if anyone else wants to guess. I don't see anything else coming in. Yes, this is a purple finch. You can see that nice face pattern separating it from a house finch. Finch would also show that nice face pattern, though a Cassin's finch bill would be a bit different, longer, and that top edge, the culmen, is slightly curved here in the purple finch, and just a stouter bill, whereas the Cassin's finch would have a very straight culmen, longer, more conical bill. But they both would show that white eyebrow and pretty crisp breast markings compared to a house finch. We'll go to the next one.
Or a comment that says tricky.
Still got some guesses trickling in.
Yep. Our ruby-crowned kinglet from several.
Yep, this bird is a ruby-crowned kinglet. And I mainly just put this in there to highlight how similar looking they are, excuse me, to the Hutton's vireo that I had a picture of up on the last slide during the show. They can be remarkably similar looking, but the field marks you can see pretty nicely in this photo, that really thin, dainty bill on the kinglet compared to the thicker, hook-tipped bill on the vireo. The eye ring, on this bird, you don't see the pale lores between the eye and the bill like you would on a vireo. Additionally, you see that black bar on the wing below the wing bar, which isn't shown in a Hutton's vireo. But these guys are common and expected all over the place in the wintertime here. Next. All right, we still got guesses trickling in, or shall we?
Our guesses are either, we have pretty much split between LeConte's thrasher and.
All right, so this is a LeConte's thrasher, and you broke up a little bit there, Kayla. I didn't actually hear what you said. The second species folks were guessing.
Crystal thrasher.
Crystal. So yeah, this is a LeConte's thrasher, that very pale sandy gray color. Crystal thrashers will be a lot darker. They're very dark gray. But they both have, you can see those undertail coverts, that rufous color there. Both birds will show that. They both have those long decurved bills, but the body color on the crystal thrasher would be a lot darker. And the LeConte's is very, very pale and ghostly. And habitat too, again, you've got no habitat cues to go on here, but in the field, habitat is extremely useful for these guys because LeConte's are very particular in the habitats they choose. They really go for those salt brush, shrubby flatlands, whereas crystal thrasher is all about the mesquite stands. And there's really no overlap between the two. All right, next.
Couple more guesses trickling in.
All right.
Have blue-winged warbler and Bullock's oriole.
All right. So this is a blue-winged warbler. You could tell the size, when you're in the field, you'd be able to tell the size. From the photo, you don't really have much scale to go on. But in the field, I think it would be obvious that this is a small, warbler, chickadee-sized little guy versus Bullock's oriole would be a lot larger than these guys, and a bit more orange too. Warbler's quite yellow. But yeah, blue-winged with that pointy bill, dark lores, white wing bars. Yep, you got it. Next up.
Some guesses rolling in. Give it another second. Nobody's got it yet.
All right. Tricky one. All right, what do you think?
Go ahead and reveal.
All right, so this is a Pacific golden plover. Again, not having size to cue off of is tricky, but structure can be useful. So they're killdeer sized, but less chunky, a bit more slender. But the bill distinctly plover-like, short and stout, but tapering to that nice point. Similarly sized and more expected black-bellied plover. Gonna have, not gonna show those golden spots on the back that you see in this bird. That bold ear patch there and the evenly washed breast pattern can help separate from the, well, much less likely, but European golden plover. But they're a medium-sized shorebird. All right, next.
I have some guesses coming in. We have Wilson's plover, snowy plover. A couple people actually guessed this bird for the last one.
All right, so this bird, again, you don't have size to cue off of, but if you were in the field, you would tell this is larger than Wilson's plover, larger than snowy. This is a black-bellied plover, medium-sized, chunkier than the golden plovers, slightly larger than killdeer, longer, thicker build than the golden plovers, but rather drab in the non-breeding plumage, vague eyebrow there, thick plover-type bill, and yes, I am a plover lover. I say plover lover. I tripped over my words on the last slide, but they are plovers. So, next bird. All right, we
got it yet. Oh wait, we do have a guess from Lauren and Roseanne for bronzed cowbird.
Yes, and they are correct. This is a bronzed cowbird. That red eye, black with the blue iridescent wings, thick bill. That's a bronzed cowbird. All right, what do we think?
A couple guesses here from Lauren and Scott for Harris sparrow.
That is correct. This is a Harris's sparrow, our largest sparrow that we've got. Same genus as white-crowned, white-throated, golden-crowned. That black face, orange bill, large sparrow. They're pretty distinct. They're not too easy to confuse with things. Next up.
Okay, we have a lot of guesses rolling in for wood thrush.
Oh my, lots of guesses. That's what we like to see. This is a wood thrush. Again, distinct bird, that bright rufous red on the back, crisp, contrasty breast spots, large thrush on the ground. It's a wood thrush. And so when I say distinct, these are all relative. This comes with looking at a ton of birds. None of these are overt and obvious. There's a lot of nuance to identifying these guys. So as I'm saying, distinct and easy, this is all relative. But here's our next bird.
See, more guesses rolling in for hermit thrush.
That's right. This is a hermit thrush. And like I said before with the wood thrush, how they're similar looking to our other brown thrushes. You got the same general body pattern there. But the hermit thrush is just much more muted overall. The back is a much grayer brown. They do show some red rufous in the tail, but only in the tail, and that is quite useful to separate them from some other thrushes. But those breast spots are often not so contrasty, and they are slightly smaller than wood thrushes as well. Oh yeah, this one.
We have one guess right off the bat that got it.
All right. Good stuff.
In, so we have, okay, so it's between Morning Warbler and Orange-crowned Warbler. So our guesses, both good guesses.
So this is a Morning Warbler. You could tell the body structure, bill size. There's a lot of things going on here. But to separate it from an orange-crowned, I would look at that bill. Orange crowns have a really fine, dainty, thin bill compared to this Morning Warbler has a little thicker of a bill and longer than an orange crown would show. But the body pattern I could see with the similar yellow and the gray hooded look. But this can look very similar to a lot of warblers and can be really tough to ID. So, but it's chunkier. It's larger than a lot of warblers. It's often on the ground. Habitat can be useful for these guys. But they might look similar to a Nashville, which would show a much bolder, complete eye ring. Maybe McGillivrays or Connecticut could look similar, but again, McGillivrays with the bold eye arcs. Connecticut would be a little larger overall size, bolder eye ring. The throat color, the light throat color suggests morning as well. Anyway.
I have a question. I'm wondering, pink legs could be a notable field mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yep, the legs are good. Yeah, I'd have to go back and check offhand what color some of those other species' legs are supposed to be. But good point. Leg color is often very useful for warbler ID. Like I said, I've got a separate hour-long presentation about warbler ID. So anyway, next bird.
Oh, we got a bunch of guesses for this one.
Good stuff.
All of them say greater black-backed gull.
Great black-backed gull. That is correct. And you likely would not be so lucky as to get this adult plumaged bird to be the first one that shows up in Nevada. It would likely be a first or second cycle bird like I had a photo of on several slides back. But monster gull, bigger than any other gull around. It would be an obviously monster gull, and you would immediately go to the field guide and look up the biggest gull. That would probably get you there. Okay, next bird.
Coming in slowly.
Good.
We have couple guesses for Hutton's Vireo.
Those couple guesses are correct. This was a Hutton's Vireo. And like I was making some points on the slide with the ruby-crowned kinglet. You can see on this bird the pale lores between the eye and the bill, that thicker bill. If I didn't have to enlarge the photo so much and compromise the quality, you might be able to see the hook tip on the bill. But you can also see that it doesn't have the dark black bar under those wing bars. And again, not that you can cue off size here, but these guys are a little larger than kinglets, which is noticeable in the field. All right, next bird.
Countdown. 5 more for you guys. Okay, so right now our guesses are split between cave swallow and cliff swallow.
All right, not bad. This is a cave swallow, and it is very similar to a cliff swallow. Looking at the head pattern for some slight differences, so the cave shows a pale throat. Cliff swallows have a dark throat. And that's the main difference. But that contrasty cap is gonna look a little different on the cave swallow and that pale throat as well. But they both show that red rump patch and the headlight above the bill. But the headlight, that sort of red above the bill, is a bit more distinct in the cliff swallow. But you can see, you might still, the cave swallow can suggest that a little bit. So really, the throat is the best thing for these guys, and vocalizations, of course. Next bird.
We have several immediate guesses for snow bunting.
And several immediate guesses correct. This is a snow bunting.
Lauren and Molly all got it.
All right. Nice work, everybody. Snow bunting. No need to explain why it is a snow bunting. Next.
Guesses rolling in for tufted duck.
Indeed.
Everyone got it right.
Nice work. Nice obvious male here. The female's not so obvious. They look similar to scop and ringneck ducks, but they have that slight head tuft. So male's nice and obvious, female's not so much. But tufted duck. This one's not exactly fair, but let's see what we get.
People are doing pretty good so far. We have a couple guesses rolling in.
All right. Any more coming in? Or oh, another one.
A couple. So we have most of the guesses. We had another guess for great crested flycatcher.
So this is a tropical kingbird, and I said at the beginning it's not exactly fair because they look exactly the same. Relative, no, so I should back up. There are differences in the bill, but they're slight, and it takes a lot of having seen a bunch of them to tell. Bills with couches are not as long and are stouter. Tropicals are a little longer, but again, difficult to gauge without having the comparison. And as far as the great crested flycatcher, again, so I'll back up to that to remind folks of that first slide where we had the dusky-capped, and when folks were guessing kingbird, and I kind of had to go, well, it's just a myarchus because of the body proportion. So you can see on this bird, it's got a relatively short tail compared to the wings, where those myarchids, which great crested is a myarchid like our dusky-capped, ash-throated, brown-crested, they have a much longer tail. But great cresteds do show a lot of yellow in the belly, so I see what you were going with there. Go for this one.
Okay, we have several guesses rolling in, and
Are they correct?
is correct so far.
All right. So this is a black vulture. You can see from they've got a really distinct flight style. They soar like a vulture, but they do the sort of flap glide style like an accipiter, like a Cooper's or sharp-shinned hawk does. And you can see these guys have those silvery gray wingtips, which in flight are a very useful mark. So let's just hope someone spots one of these flying over Nevada and gets them on our checklist soon. So yeah, with that, that's the end of our quiz. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Good job on the quiz. And definitely a very special thank you to our records committee, Martin Myers, Gene Tinsman, Justin Streit, Alex Harper, Ben Zyla, Frank Fogarty, and Greg Cyphers. You guys do a lot of hard work and we really appreciate it. So I'd also like to mention that we do these events for the community and our members. So if there's events that folks in the audience would like to see, or folks have suggestions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. There's our contact info. You can find us online on our website. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.